My sister-in-law excluded me from family photos on a trip I paid for, but now she's bankrupt because I left her luxury hotel bill unpaid. You won't believe this. I'm writing this whole story while I'm on vacation in Miami. Yes, it's a shame. So I'm 47 years old, together with my wife Reggae, who's 42, her parents who are 76 and 70, and her sister Ela, who's 38. We came on vacation 2 days ago. It was supposed to be a fun trip, but Ella is making it miserable for me. She's just ruining the trip, and I don't know how to deal with this. Reg and I have been married for 10 years. We're both doing well financially, and we travel a lot. We plan at least 3 good vacations a year and many weekend getaways to relax. We both have demanding jobs with good salaries. We don't have kids, and we like living this way. For the past 2 years, we've made sure to take Reg's parents on at least 1 trip a year. They're getting older, and her dad is dealing with serious health issues, so her mom can't travel alone with him. For this summer, her dad kindly asked to travel to Miami. They had their honeymoon here, and for some reason he fears this might be his last trip. God forbid. So we agreed. He even offered to share some expenses because a week in Miami is expensive, but we refused. We assured him since I'm earning well and they've been very good to me. However, this year, Reg's sister Ela also joined. She's not doing well financially and has 3 school-aged children. Every year when we plan a trip and come back, she feels sad because she hasn't been able to afford a trip since her honeymoon. This year she asked directly if she could come along. I agreed, knowing I'd have to pay because of course she can't afford a Miami vacation. I didn't mind too much. Sometimes you have to support family. I made all the reservations for everyone, flights and hotels, but from the moment we landed, Ela started acting strangely. And by strangely, I mean she made an effort to exclude me from everything. At first, I didn't think much of it. We arrived at a beach resort, and after settling in, Ela wanted to take a family photo. It seemed innocent enough, right? Wrong. Just as we were about to pose, she turned to me and said, "Oh, you can take the photo for us. We want just the 4 of us, Mom, Dad, Reg, and me." I was taken aback, but I didn't make a scene. Maybe they just wanted a photo of the original family, I thought, but it didn't end there. Ela made this a recurring theme throughout the trip. Every time we stopped at a scenic spot or did something fun, she'd say, "Just the 4 of us," or "This is just for family." Guess who was always holding the camera? Me several times. Reg defended me and said, "He's also part of the family." My in-laws also asked me to join, but Ela never missed an opportunity to leave me out. The photos she posted on social media barely included me. It looked like the 4 of them had come on vacation together. It was frustrating. I wasn't included in half the trip photos, and instead of making memories, I found myself playing photographer or bag carrier. Then in the afternoon, we decided to spend time at the hotel pool. They had a beautiful infinity pool with ocean views. I thought it would be a relaxing break after all the walking we'd done. Just as I was about to join everyone in the water, Ela turned to me and said, "Can you stay out for a moment? We want a girls' photo, just Reg, Mom, and me." I thought it was fine. No big deal, but after they took that photo, Ela made sure I was conveniently busy every time they brought out the camera. First it was just the women. Then she wanted just the sisters. And of course another with the original family. If she disliked my company so much, why did she even come with us? Yesterday we went sightseeing on a quiet boat ride. It should have been a calm family day. But of course Ella found a way to leave me out again. Most activities on these boats are arranged in seats of 4, 2, and 2. Since there were 5 of us, Ela suggested that Reg's parents sit together in one row and Ela would sit with Reg in the next. That would make it easier to take family photos and make memories. That left me alone. Ella turned to me and said, "Oh, you can take the next spot. It's more balanced this way." They even bought a souvenir photo from the ride with me sitting alone like a stranger. I understand that sometimes someone has to be out of the frame, but why is it always me? Ella could switch places sometime, right? Another night, we went to a fancy seafood restaurant. It was one of those places where you need to make a reservation days in advance, but I'd already taken care of that, making sure we had a great table with a perfect sunset view. When we arrived at the restaurant, we were taken to a round table for 6. Now, anyone who's been in this situation knows that the best seats are the ones facing the view. Naturally, I thought Reg and I would sit together, with her parents across from us, leaving Ella on one side. But as we were about to sit down, Ella quickly slid into the seat next to Reaga, and her parents took the 2 seats facing the view. That left me on the side without a view, squeezed between Reaga's parents and the server's station. Rage tried to protest, saying she wanted to sit with me, but Ella snapped back, telling her to stop being so clingy and that it was a family trip. I bit my tongue. I thought, okay, it's just one meal. But halfway through dinner, when I tried to join the conversation about family stories, Ela kept changing the subject to things I wasn't involved in. She talked about childhood memories, high school trips, and inside jokes that naturally didn't include me. Reg and even her parents tried to include me by giving context behind these stories, but Ella kept interrupting, making everything feel forced. By dessert, I was practically a ghost at the table, ignored while everyone else laughed and remembered. Today, we booked a spa day. I reserved a private suite for Riaj and me, another for my in-laws, and a single room for Ella. However, my father-in-law wasn't feeling well and wanted to spend the day resting on the beach. I thought the 4 of us could still go and have fun, but Ela pulled another one of her moves. "You should probably stay here and keep Dad bad company, she said. It would be nice if just us women did the spa treatments together. I want to spend time with Mom and have a girls' day. I was furious, but I tried not to explode. I paid for all of this, and now I was being told it was a women-only activity. After this, I wasn't in the mood to join anyway, so I stayed and relaxed with my father-in-law. It was fun and comforting. I wanted to share my frustration about Ella, but I kept it to myself so I wouldn't ruin the mood. Now, with 3 days left, I really can't stand Ela. However, I don't want my anger to ruin the trip for my in-laws. How do I handle this situation? Edit, yes, I expressed my concerns to Rayaj the other night. She understands that I felt hurt, but she says it's possible Ela isn't doing it on purpose. Growing up, they hardly had family vacations. Her father was mostly deployed in the military, so maybe Ella wants to make the most of the opportunity to be with family. Sometimes I feel like maybe I'm overreacting or acting entitled. Do you think it's intrusive of me to feel entitled to be included in everything just because I paid for the trip? Am I overthinking this? Update 1. The revenge, thanks to everyone for being on my side. I know sometimes it doesn't seem right, but what she did wasn't okay. Spoiler alert, I got my revenge. But to find out, keep reading. By the end of the trip, I'd had enough. I was being treated like a stranger on a trip I'd paid for, and I felt the blood boiling every time Ela left me out. The last straw came the day before we were supposed to leave. I took Rayag aside and asked her why she wasn't defending me. I told her I felt like a nobody, and Ela could see how hurt I was. She sighed and said, I know, I see it. But confronting Ela will only make things worse. We don't want to ruin the trip for my parents, especially with Dad's condition. Can we just let it go for now? I didn't want to create drama either, especially with the health of Rage's father, so I let it go in that moment, but deep down, I was already planning my revenge. I wasn't going to let Ella get away with treating me like this on a trip I'd financed. On the day we were leaving, I told Rayaj to go to the airport with her parents and that I would go with Ela. Rayaj looked at me and said, I know what you're trying to do. Of course you know, I replied. And now stay neutral, like you've been doing the whole trip. She finally nodded. Then I went to the hotel reception to settle the accounts. The hotel operated in such a way that although room rentals were prepaid, all extra charges, like meals, room service, and activities, were settled at checkout. I asked the manager to separate the bills for each suite, making up some excuse about taxes. He agreed it wasn't a big deal for them. I proceeded to pay everything for my suite and my in-laws' suite, but for Ela's suite, I asked the manager to charge her directly. By then, Rayaj and my in-laws had already gone to the airport. They needed to get there early to arrange wheelchairs and such. The manager called Ela and asked her to come down to reception to settle her account. Ella came down immediately, and when the manager handed her the bill, you should have seen the expression on her face. She looked at me, confused. I stood there with a serious face. She got a little nervous and asked, You're not going to cover mine? I smiled and replied, I already paid for my family. You can cover yours. She hadn't realized how much she'd accumulated during the trip. Room service, spa treatments, the minibar, and all the extras she'd been ordering added up to a considerable bill. She swiped her credit card, only for it to be declined. Apparently, her card barely covered half the amount. She was furious, struggling to find a way to pay. She shot me pleading looks from time to time, but I felt no pity for Ella. She got nasty looks from the hotel staff and other guests, which was quite satisfying. I just sat on the sofa and enjoyed the show. I was prepared to pay her bill if she came over and apologized for her behavior, but she was too proud to do that. Instead, she just waited, hoping I'd voluntarily offer to pay. She ended up calling her husband, who was not happy at all about having to bail her out. The bill was almost a month of his salary, if not more. After an awkward argument, she finally got him to send the money to cover the bill, but she was furious. I wanted to leave her at the hotel to deal with the problem, but since the reservation was in my name, I couldn't. I was prepared to face the consequences and pay the bill if Ela couldn't cover it, but I'd already gotten my revenge by humiliating her. She finally managed to pay, and the hotel got us a taxi for the airport. She didn't speak to me after that. To add to her misery, she also hadn't checked in for her flight. So when we arrived at the airport, we were already rushed and late. On top of that, Ela had to deal with the hassle of getting her boarding pass. As if that wasn't enough, I got Rayaj, my in-laws, and myself upgraded to business class, leaving Ela in economy. I left her in line and went to priority boarding. When she finally boarded the flight, we were already seated. She walked past us but didn't speak to anyone. She was furious. The moment we landed, Ella went straight to her parents and told them everything, trying to paint me as the villain who abandoned her at the hotel. She caused such a scene that it stressed out her father. She started arguing right there at the airport, crying as she narrated how I'd humiliated her in front of hotel staff and guests, and how I didn't upgrade her or check her in. I calmly explained my perspective, that she'd spent the whole trip excluding me and treating me like a stranger despite me paying for everything. So why should I cover her expenses if she didn't consider me part of the family? Rege's mother, trying to keep the peace, just shook her head and said, Ela, enough. We don't want to get involved. We saw how you kept pushing him away. We asked him to join, but you had your own plans to leave him out. Now deal with it. But Ella wasn't done. She accused me of using money to control control everyone and called me a horrible man. She looked at Rage and said, "You sided with your husband to humiliate your sister, your own blood. You'll see what this man does to you. He'll cheat on you and you won't be able to do anything because you're blinded by his money." This led to an ugly fight between Raj and Ayla. Raj's father, who had been mostly silent during the trip, simply said, "Ayla, your brother-in-law has already done enough for you. If you can't appreciate it, better keep quiet." There was absolute silence. Then he asked me to take him home as soon as possible. I helped him into the car and then we left, leaving Ella at the airport. She was too proud to join us in the car even though she hadn't arranged a ride. Maybe she took a taxi home, which would have cost her a lot. Her house is about 100 to 120 kilometers from the airport. I dropped my in-laws at their house and they both thanked me for everything. Their gratitude was all that mattered to me. My mother-in-law hugged me more than usual and that made my day. After that, Rayaj and I went home. We were both silent about the issue, ignoring the elephant in the room. The next day, we went back to work and life seemed to return to normal. But the other day,
Reed broke silent that Ella was having problems with her husband over.
He asked her to pay him back every penny since she couldn't cover her excess spending. Now she's bankrupt from paying that and her credit card bills. Reed has supported me but admitted that maybe I took things a little far. Still, she acknowledged that Ella needed to learn a lesson. She brought it on herself. So Reddit, was I the bad guy for leaving her to pay her own bills? Or did she deserve it after everything she put me through? Update 2. The aftermath, I received mixed reactions on my last post. Some people said I went too far and basically wanted me to be a pushover. Well, I'm not that. I know my worth. I didn't expect Ella to treat me like I was her servant, but if she needed some respect, the least I expected was to be included, right? As I mentioned, I was willing to pay if Ella had come over and fixed things, but she wasn't willing to acknowledge her mistakes.
Anyway, I don't owe anyone an explanation for my actions.
I did what I felt was right. Ella has never been close to me. Sure, we see each other at family gatherings and she visits Riyadh often, but beyond greetings, we barely have conversations. Still, it didn't bother me to pay for her trip. That deserves some respect. As I mentioned in my last post, her husband wasn't thrilled about having to bail her out. With all modesty, I feel the bill was almost equal to his monthly income. Who would be happy spending a month's salary paying for their wife's extravagant hotel bill? As expected, Ella painted me as the villain in front of her husband. Things got so bad that he refused to attend Thanksgiving dinner at my in-laws' house because I would be there every year. My mother-in-law organizes this dinner, and this year she wanted to make it special, especially given her father's declining health. Her husband declined the invitation, and when my mother-in-law confronted him, he said he didn't want to share a table with someone as evil as me who humiliates people with fewer financial resources. My mother-in-law then told him the truth about Ila's behavior on the trip. She suggested he look at the vacation photos to see how blatantly she left me out. There was barely a group photo where I was included. Actually, I have a decent relationship with her husband. Not very close, not very distant. We meet every year at Thanksgiving and sometimes at other holidays. I always thought he was a good guy, and I never looked down on him or anyone else. After hearing all this from Rege, I hesitated to attend the dinner, but I still went for my father-in-law's sake. Ila and her husband didn't show up. When my father-in-law was nearby, my mother-in-law said they couldn't come because they were visiting his parents. I didn't realize until later that was just a lie to keep my father-in-law from getting stressed. After he went to sleep, my mother-in-law told me the truth. She and her husband have been fighting non-stop, and she's become unreasonable. She constantly belittles him for his low income, and now expects him to take a second job in addition to his full-time work. He agreed, but only on the condition that he wouldn't be responsible for household chores or childcare. Ella didn't like that. I was surprised to learn that she only works 20 hours a week, but expects him to work over 60 hours between 2 jobs and still do his share of housework. My mother-in-law has been trying to advise Ella and make her understand the reality of her situation, but it seems Ela has tasted the luxury lifestyle and now wants to maintain it. Finally, my mother-in-law had to tell Ella that if she ends up divorced, she shouldn't expect her parents to step in and help her. When Rieg and I got back from dinner, we talked about how it was probably a mistake to bring Ella on the trip in the first place. I keep remembering a phrase I read at one of the resorts. Once you experience the luxury of a private island, you'll never set foot on a public island. The same goes for flying business class. I feel bad for her husband. The poor man is suffering. I hope Ella comes to her senses before it's too late. I wanted to share this update, thinking it might be useful for someone else dealing with similar family dynamics. It's frustrating when someone treats you like a stranger, especially when you're trying to be generous. Despite her behavior, I'm glad I went to Thanksgiving dinner for my father-in-law, and it shows how much I care about family despite the tension. It's unfortunate that Ela is creating this division, but it seems the truth about her behavior is finally coming to light. I hope she takes some time to think and realizes the impact of her attitude before it affects her relationships even more. Update 3. The explosion. Well, everything Everything has finally exploded with Hila and her husband, and divorce seems inevitable. The situation has become unsustainable between them, and he's reached his limit, especially because of the weight of Hila's debts and the constant stress this has added to his life. To start, I feel bad for him. It's not his fault, not his wife's decisions, not her attitude during the trip, but he's still the one paying part of the price in every way. Since the conflict erupted between them, Hila has done nothing but continue blaming me for all her problems. It's easier for Hila to blame me and say her debts and broken marriage are the result of my lack of support, rather than admitting that things are this way because she's been unable to apologize, acknowledge her behavior, and face the consequences of her actions. Even though she had multiple opportunities to make amends and apologize, she clings to her version of events, and I refuse to carry the guilt for her marriage falling apart. I've spoken with her parents, who also don't support her in this matter. In fact, they're frustrated with Hila and say she's done enough to deserve things reaching this point. In their own words, Hila has bought all the tickets to ruin her marriage. They know the situation is complex, but they can't even take her side in this story. They're worried about the impact all this will have on the children and the family dynamic, but they believe Ella must face the consequences of her decision. I also spoke with her husband, who, to my relief, doesn't blame me for the situation. He told me that although the debt issue was the trigger, they already had previous problems in their marriage, especially due to Ella's lack of commitment to work and contribute to the household. In the end, he reached a breaking point. That's why they're now living separately since Hila has left the house, but don't think her husband kicked her out. Ella left on her own. Her husband gave her two options. Either Ella stays in the house with the kids and takes care of everything while he leaves, or he stays and takes care of the house and kids while Ella leaves. And to everyone's surprise, Ella chose the second option. She preferred to leave the house rather than make the effort to stay with her children and manage the household. This gave me a completely new perspective on her husband. He's someone who truly doesn't fear hard work. During one of our conversations, I started considering the possibility of offering him a job at my company. People with his work ethic and commitment are always valuable to the team, and I think I could find him a position with good pay and better benefits. In a way, I feel like I owe it to him, because even though he's not at fault for what his wife did, he's also a victim of the situation and is struggling to move forward. So in summary, that's what's been happening lately. It's been an exhausting process for everyone, but I feel things are starting to head in the right direction, even if at a high cost for some people. Maybe I'll update again in a few months if things evolve, if Hila and her husband finally divorce, or if something relevant happens in my life. Edit. Some people asked me where Hila lives now. She's staying at one of her friends' houses. Her parents made it very clear they didn't want her in their house. Update 4. The final resolution. Several months have passed since the last time I updated. And in this time, many things happened in my life and in my extended family's life. Now that everything has calmed down a bit, I want to tell you about the consequences of what happened and how things have evolved. First, I have to start with some sad news. My father-in-law passed away. In the end, he was right when he said the trip to Miami would be his last big outing. It's devastating because I really love that man, and losing him has been a hard blow for all of us. There were some who told me I should have confronted Hila's behavior earlier, that I should have put a stop to her slights from the very beginning. However, I'm grateful I didn't. Putting up with Hila during that trip meant my father-in-law could enjoy a vacation with his family. We even had our moment on the beach, and I still remember some things we talked about together. He was always there for me and treated me like a son. He gave me advice, helped me when I was just starting my life with Re-Age, and taught me more than I can put into words. I know my wife will miss him deeply, and my mother-in-law too. But I feel I've also lost someone who was a pillar in my life, like when he helped us when we were starting our careers. He was a wise and generous man who never asked for anything in return for his help and love. I'm glad I could contribute in part to his happiness in his final days. Moving on to the topic of my sister-in-law and her divorce, the papers are already signed. So officially, Hila is divorced. I'm sure you're wondering what happened with her debts and my ex-brother-in-law. Well, during the divorce process, he offered her two quite reasonable options for her situation. Ella could choose to share custody of the children, but in that case, she would be completely responsible for her personal debts. Her credit card debt was still Ella's, but she would also have to pay him back the money. He used to cover the debt she accumulated in Miami, deducted from the spousal support he owed her. The other option was that he would get majority custody of the children, meaning they would live with him during the week and only spend weekends with Ella, and he would take care of the debt. Without much surprise, Ella chose the second option. This agreement benefits him since he won't have to pay child support. As the children spend most of their time with him, some might think Hila lost an important financial opportunity by not wanting majority custody, and maybe it was a mistake for Hila from that perspective. But deep down, I think Hila simply doesn't have a genuine interest in her children. Proof of this is that she's already started dating other men, all of them with comfortable financial positions. According to rumors, it seems her intention was simply to detach herself from her family responsibilities and find someone who could offer her the life of luxury she so desperately wanted. wanted. On the other hand, to give this update a positive ending since it started a bit low, my ex-brother-in-law is now officially my colleague. As I mentioned earlier, I was able to get him a position at my company, and I'm very happy for him. The pay is better, and he also has benefits that come in very handy, like the on-site daycare at the office for his youngest child. However, we wanted to be strategic about the timing. We made sure he started his new job at the right moment, so he wouldn't have to pay higher spousal support due to his new salary. Despite how difficult all this has been for him, he says he can finally start to see a light at the end of the tunnel. Life somehow goes on. We've all been through complicated times, but I feel fortunate to be able to say that the overall situation has improved. In fact, we're starting to plan our next trip. This time it will be a different trip since my father-in-law won't be with us for obvious reasons, and that leaves a void that will be hard to fill. However, we plan to bring my mother-in-law. She needs a change of scenery and a little encouragement. I'm sure she'll also enjoy a family getaway that allows her to distract herself and move forward, at least as much as she can. And don't worry, we also have a trip planned for just Riage and me. We just wanted to do something nice for my mother-in-law. As you can imagine, there's someone who clearly won't be part of this trip. I think it's pretty clear who I'm referring to. Ella is the last person we would want to invite, and I think we all know that her presence is no longer welcome. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more Reddit stories. Karma always finds a way. See you in the next one.